Good morning, everyone. This is Training and AutoML Working Room Community Call on 5th of March. This meeting will be recorded and published on YouTube. This meeting is governed by the Kubeflow Code of Conduct. Welcome, everyone. So first of all, let maybe spend like 5 to 10 minutes for the introduction. So do you have any kind of new people here on the call just want to introduce themselves to the community? Just want to say hello. I can see some, new folks here on this call. Feel free to unmute yourself or just type in the chat if you want to say something. All right. Yeah, it's fine. Like in any case, like if you have any questions, feel free to let us know. Like and jump into the call. Like we can discuss. Yeah. Hi, Dmitry. Do you want to unmute yourself or just wanna, type in the chat? Um,
Yeah, sure. I'm like rare guest here. I just joining to track the community is doing. We have just shortly about me. I'm a team lead in a US company. We're working with the machine learning
mhm,
automation for the e-commerce business, and we have quite interested in Kubeflow. We spent some time evaluating this system platform for our needs. We had some interesting findings based on our prototypes, but yeah, and unfortunately, we failed to integrate the Kubeflow for our needs and
mhm,
looking for the different tool, but I'm still curious about what's happening, how the platform is developed, and what the new exciting features will come, and it will be possible for us to integrate it in any future, and will the problems that we had previously will be resolved. So it is the reason I'm here.
yeah, that's great. So just a few questions, like if you don't mind, like can you just repeat like what company you affiliate with? Where you work?
Um, I'm working with a Centra group. It
Okay.
is holding which have different e-commerce
Okay.
stores on
Yeah,
US
makes
market.
sense. And in terms of your experience with Kubeflow, like, did you try to use specific components or you try to install the entire platform for your needs?
Uh, we try to install it probably the whole setup
Mm-hmm.
firstly, but then we start to focus on the pipeline only
Mm-hmm.
because it is quite it is like a thing that we are currently required. We compare it with the airflow,
Mm-hmm.
and we find out that the complexity of the Kubeflow and the way how we are currently developing all our ML pipelines is different. So we would like to have this more interactive way to create the pipelines, and Kubeflow provides its own DSL based on the Python,
Yep.
and there are a lot of confusion from the developer side that they are expecting to getting the same experience comparing with the Python, but unfortunately they're getting the DSL, which have their own limitation. There are some issues with the debugging.
Mm-hmm.
It works quite well in a GCP, and it was our first experience. We were very exciting about how it works, but it works well when you have the already um, working pipeline, which provides the some possibility to train the model. But when you are starting building your own pipeline, it's become much more complicated.
Yeah, that makes. I think it's super helpful for us to see, like, just for you, like, to keep it posted. Like the KFP Qflow pipelines call, I think they hold it like every other Wednesday. Like, if you want to give
Mhm,
the feedback, because I think it's very valuable for us to understand what is the pain points for
mhm.
using
Right.
those, KFP DSL, and we kind of like heard similar kind of feedback from other users, like like this kind of challenging to especially configure and like make sure you can run KFP control plane um, in is part of your orchestration. Like we would love to maybe speak more about specific in terms of user experience, what should be improved and like how we can like enhance the support of KFP upstream, because like from our experience, yes, Airflow is great, but Airflow probably not ML focus, and sometimes like it doesn't give
Right,
you
right.
same capabilities for artifacts, like how you can manage lineage and data set
Yeah,
models. So I think this is like why some people actually decide to go to the KFP approach, because KFP kind of like more, like ML focus in terms of, like the life cycle, Airflow, more kind of data processing workflows, right? And many people use Airflow for ML as well because they don't have any alternatives, right? But I feel like, we should, the entire community, the Kubeflow pipeline is like one of the most popular project from the Kubeflow ecosystem, right? But we should like
mhm,
move towards how to make it simpler, right, to configure, right, and use it not only on GCP, which was like the Google focus, right, for the last 2 years, 2 to 3 years, I would say. Um,
exactly.
yeah, that makes sense.
So
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, we had completely the same conclusions, and that's why we started with the Kubeflow, but then switched it to Airflow to investigate
Mhm.
will the Airflow fits our needs. And
Yep,
unfortunately, we figure out the Airflow have its own issues, and unfortunately, they are roadblock for us. And we unfortunately didn't even choosing the Airflow.
yeah,
And they see that Airflow develops. There is some interesting, exciting features that are coming specifically for ML lineage, for the
yep.
manual lineage, and we'll see, we'll see. So we just put on hold this initiative, and we'll track during the year what will happen. So
Absolutely. So feel
yeah,
free to reach out, like if you want to have any follow-up discussion on Slack, and
okay,
also like we
right.
can create an issue to discuss this topic as well.
Yeah, the
So
Slack is the right place where to discuss those topics.
yeah,
All right.
yeah, yeah. Usually, like the entire community is on Slack, so we have our own channels for every project. So we are
Okay.
in CNCF Slack. So feel free to
Hmm.
chime in and ask any questions there as well.
Okay. Thank
Great,
you a lot.
thank you. Any other new members who just want to introduce themselves before we get started? Uh, And feel free to again share the feedback. I think like we try to work with the community to, establish kind of user advisory group and user groups. Because like for us as developers, contributors, like especially important to have this, user interaction all the time. And we try to work to see how we can make it, more structured and, like have these regular calls to discuss problems with different components and make sure like we as the developers and contributors understand how people use Qflow projects, right? This is like what's our goal for the like me short and medium term, I would say. So with that, let me share my screen so we can go quickly through the items. So I guess like the bigger topic right now to discuss is the LLM trainer cap that we want to finalize, I think today. But before I jump to this, let me quickly go through like the release planning for training operator and Katip, right? So we need to release like 1.9.1 for the Qflow 1.10 release. Um, I just want to know like is there any specific PRs or bug fixes we want to merge before we can cut the official release for Training Operator or NKT project? Um, so the only one for Training Operator, I would say the GitHub container registry. Um, I don't know if Matt's on a call today, but do you have any concerns like in terms of make sure we can push the images to GitHub container registry before we make the release? Or we can do it like in the next version. Um, I think the problem is with that, like we need to make sure that like the Docker actually will cut the pull rate limits after April 1st. So we just need to make sure like the customers who are using the training operator 1.9.1 and 1.9.0 will not get any problems with that. But at the same time, we also want to push the Docker Hub. So we'll keep this mirror across GitHub container registry and Docker Hub. Um, so folks can choose wherever they want to. Um, so yeah, I think maybe any volunteers here on the call who just want to help us to migrate training operator, not trainer, but training operator images to container GitHub registry. Um,
The PR that you just showed, is it for training operator or trainer?
yeah, it's for trainer actually.
Okay,
So
okay.
yeah, it's for trainer, but we need to do this the same for training operator 1.9.
Uh, I think I can try it out.
Yeah, thank you, Salish. Let me make a note. So yeah, I think it should be very simple, right? We just need to configure the CI/CD, right? And then
Mm.
we need to just we want to mirror images to Docker Hub and to GHCR, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And after this, I will probably cut the next release for training part, the 1.9.1, to include this feature. Yeah, for KDIP, I think we need to do the same. Any other bug fixes or PRs will emerge before we can cut 0.18? Yeah, good.
You mentioned 2 PRs a while back when I asked you. Let me put it in the chat.
Yeah. Take a look. 2420 and 2511, right? Oh yeah, it's a tune. Yeah, it's a good point. Let me ping Helen to see if she can finish it before RC. Yeah, so this is the E2E test for the tune API for hyperparameter optimization, like for fine-tuning, like when we do the fine-tuning, right? And this is the PR for deprecation warnings on Customize 5, right? Yep. Let me make a note here. Any other things, Salish, you think we should include?
I think that those are the main PRs, from what I remember.
All right.
Maybe there are another PR for small volume mount in the tune API, and it's reviewed by me initially.
Can you post in the chat, like, Shao, so we can add it to the meeting notes?
Yeah, I'll add it to the doc. This one.
Yeah. So let me also add it there. Yeah, 2508, right?
Yeah.
And is it a new feature? Yeah, it's a volume mount, right, for Tune API. Oh yeah. I remember I had a discussion with Antonin as well, on the trainer side, right? Like to support this storage volume as part of this Tune API. Yeah, I think that makes sense.
But there are still some works to do. He haven't implemented the end-to-end test for now. And we may request him to update the PR if we could catch up with the deadline of the next version.
Yep. Yeah. Can you just ask contributor if if this PR can be finished before RC?
I will follow up with it.
Oh, okay. All right. Anything else we're missing before we can cut RC? Actually, not RC. Like, I don't know, for KDIP, probably we want to make the official release as well, right? For 0.18.
One thing I think the release team wanted to know is so we updated docs for training operator and trainer, but is there any changes in docs for Catib?
Yeah. So we have like this big PR for a feature that was implemented by Helen, like to support this LLM fine-tuning parameter optimization, right? So I really would love to, include this PR, finish this documentation updates for 1.10. So this is the guide, right? So I think
I see. Okay.
I left a few comments, I think a couple of weeks ago. I think Madi is still working on it.
Okay.
Yeah, so basically this includes like documentation of how to use this new Tune API for parameter optimization, right?
Got it.
Yeah, so
Sounds
we
good.
still need to work on this. So let me, if we can, even if someone can ping Madi about this part, it would be also great. All right. Anything else?
I think that's it from my side.
All right. So with that, let me maybe jump to this discussion around this cap and just give you a quick overview where we are right now. So I think we've been discussing this for quite some time already. I think we started this discussion since June last year, because one of the goals of this new project was to actually create the blueprints for fine tuning. And it is why we're kind of creating this approach of, this template approach to split train job and training runtime. So folks can quickly do not only, distribute training and define their own function or define their own script they want to optimize, but also we provide them a set of recipes they can use to fine tune LLM on top of Kubernetes, right? So I think like we come up with a solution after a few weeks of discussions to initially use TorchTune as the first version for of LLM trainer to allow us to do the distributed fine tuning. And I think the experience, I think we discussed this few weeks ago, but the goal of the experience would be um, again looking at the diagram, like platform engineer will be responsible to configure runtimes, and we as the community also support a set of runtimes by default. And data scientists or ML engineers can use this runtime with Python SDK to trigger those distributed fine-tuning jobs on top of Kubernetes. And then we're going to leverage the storage initializer to offload CPU, like offload the IO on the CPU nodes, and make sure we only do uh, training on GPU nodes. I think like we also have some sort of, I think we discussed this in the cap with you, Shao, a little bit, but I see kind of we can even do more optimization on this front in terms of offload more data processing for CPU-based nodes. So I know that today Torch 2 doesn't support this. Like I'm specifically talking about tokenization, right? Like how we can make sure that tokenization is happening on CPU-based nodes. So we don't really keep GPU idle when we do the data processing step. I think this is very important for us to consider for the long term, and I would love to understand, like, from the Torchstone perspective, like, is it possible to split these two tasks? Um, right? That makes sense
Yeah,
to you, what I'm talking about? Yeah, good.
yeah. Currently, I think how to the data processing logic is highly coupled with their sending procedure. So
Mm-hmm.
it may mean that we need to process the data sets in our GPU node.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I would
Yeah,
love
but
to
I will
maybe, yeah,
invest.
yeah, good.
Yeah, I will investigate into it if to see if we can upload this work to CPU node.
Yeah, are they open to decoupling that? Maybe we collaborate with them up to see if they'd be
Yeah,
open
I
to
think,
that.
yeah, I think we should start an issue upstream in Torchstone and say we have this kind of use case, like to offload this training on CPU, sorry, this data processing to CPU. And could you just suggest some ideas and maybe um, your thoughts on this topic, right? Um,
Yeah, maybe I should discuss with them in part two.
yeah, Shao, do you want to like create an issue in their, GitHub? Just maybe not right now, but when you have time, just create an issue, and I can also comment, at my points, like to see how we can do this optimization, just to gather the initial feedback from them to see what we can do for the long term, right? Even after initial implementation. What do you think?
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, I will try it. But from a perspective view, they download mode, their model downloading and dataset downloading logic is highly coupled with tune run command,
Mhm.
and they need to specify these configurations in the config file, and we'll pass this config file into the CLI command. And
Mhm.
it's for now, I think it's highly coupled with uh with this.
Yeah.
So
And it's yeah.
I will
Go
ask them in their community to ask for further support for downloading model and dataset from CPU node.
Mhm. And even not only downloading, but also tokenization, right? Like the step when we tokenize data set, right? To make sure we can feed it
Yeah,
to the LLM, right? Um,
yeah,
yeah, I think that would be, yeah. Maybe they can suggest some ideas like why they did it initially, or maybe at least like some background, Like maybe it's because they want to make sure, data loaders and data set kind of co-located, or maybe in the, in the same node. Or maybe they have some other ideas like why they make sure, because I think it's kind of like always challenging to bypass data, via network. I think there are some kind of, optimization techniques like what folks are doing, but it is not kind of straightforward way how you can, bypass data in memory via the network, so you can make sure it's actually like have a, high throughput, right? Between your
Y-
CPU-based nodes and GPU-based nodes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I just feel like there is kind of opportunity for us to, work with them and see how we can optimize it, right? Especially for,
Yeah.
how we kind of decouple data processing from the trainer itself, right? Um,
Yeah.
it's initializer job, yeah.
Sound good to me.
Makes sense. Yeah, so I think overall like looks good. So on the experience side, Serge, before we jump to your discussion, talk about, so like I think our kind of final discussion looks like, I think it's not updated, right? Let me open the updated cap. Um, I think, Shao, you push the latest commit, right? Where you updated this folder structure, right? Or you
Yeah.
haven't pushed this yet, right? This
What,
commit. Yeah.
what do you find now? What
Oh
you are
yeah,
finding now?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, sorry for that.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. Like I think we can, yeah, just like you give an overview for everyone else. Like the goal, like how we want to structure those runtimes after discussions. Like we want to create a folder under runtimes directory called TorchTune, and place runtime for every model we as a community planning to support initially. So initially, maybe we will support maybe one or two models, but the differences here, like we want to provide kind of one recipe, one default recipe that users can use to do full fine tuning without like, PEFT, without LoRa, just, have one recipe where, users can quickly do, one click fine tuning. But if they want to adjust it, they can always use the Python SDK to configure some parameters like LoRa config, or, learning rate, some, hyper parameters um, on top of this default full fine tuning config. So the experience from the user perspective will look like, let me show you some examples. Um, yeah, I think this is like Shao mentioned. So basically, user can do one-click fine-tuning when they just, bypass the runtime reference to the train API, and everything is handled as a default configuration by the user behind the scenes. But they can also use they can also override the parameters using this torch tune config under fine tuning config argument. So, for example, like I want to say I want to use this, Llama runtime, but I want to bypass like, this LoRa config, this rank, this alpha for parameter efficient fine tuning. So maybe I don't want to do the full fine tuning. I just want to reduce number of parameters I want to optimize, right? And then, bypass additional configuration like number of nodes, or like D type, like B floating or floating point, depends on the GPU availability that I have. Yeah, so any questions, like Salish, what specific things you want to talk about? Maybe I want to like, reiterate on some things here. Um,
Yeah, so I had one doubt. So,
mhm.
like I understand, uh, I was just wondering, what if we have something like a enum call model in TorchTute config, and if we do that, we can avoid storing so many runtime refs, right? Because uh, to decide what recipe and config you want, all you need is the model name, the
Yeah,
recipe,
yeah, yeah.
and the config. Why don't we just have an enum for model name, and then we can make the same map, and that way we can have one cluster training runtime for torch tune, and then everything else we can fill in args. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think like putting model under torsion makes sense. I think like we didn't. I think Shao initially proposed to have one runtime for torch tune. Like why we didn't want to do this, because that will not allow us to do one click fine tuning, right? Like, because users, like, we don't give this kind of experience when users just install everything and want to say, I don't know anything about Torch tune, even maybe not Torch, even maybe I'm not ML engineer, right? Even
Mm-hmm.
maybe just I want to, experiment with ML on Kubernetes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So with this kind of approach, like, I understand that it kind of like require for us to maintain more runtimes. But like the problem with this, like, it allows me to quickly see the value, right? Without modification of anything, right? Um, I just pass the model I want to use, and this model will trigger the full fine tuning for me, right? Um,
Mm. Uh, so
mhm.
ultimately, like even if we have an enum call model, that way the users can see what models are present and like all the other configs will remain the same. Like it's essentially like all
Yeah,
of
yeah,
the uh, models you're converting into an enum within the client, right?
yeah, yeah,
And we can have some default value of that model. And that way, like it's still the same experience, right? I don't
Mhm.
understand why the experience would be improved with having multiple of these, because essentially this is only storing the model name, right? Like this
Yeah, but no, not really. Like, it's not only model name; it's also the configuration. Because I think Shao mentioned this before, but some of those configurations, they're not compatible between each other. Like, for example, in TorchTune, if I remember correctly, Shao, point me if I'm wrong, but some of those recipes, they're different, right? Depends on the model. So, like, if we open, like Llama 3.3, yeah, good.
I think some of the configuration files are different from others. For example, we currently TorchTune support multi-node fine-tuning only for the Llama 3.3. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So,
yeah, Llama 3.3. Llama.
Mm.
this one, right?
No, Llama. Yeah, 70 billion for multi-node .yaml.
Oh,
This
yeah,
file.
yeah, yeah. So let me full multi-node. This one, right?
Yeah, this file is for the multi-node support. But this configuration it disables the tensor parallelism because they haven't supported two-D parallelism for the multi-node fine-tuning. However, in the full fine-tuning config of 70 billion, so it's a 70 B for .yaml in the left tag. This configuration enables the tensor parallelism. So I think we can use the same configuration file for all of the fine-tuning strategies and mutation because some of these configurations are not compatible, such as tensor parallelism.
Yeah. So we're talking about this one, right? So I guess like we cannot apply tensor parallelism to gamma, for example, right? Is it true?
If Gemma is not supporting multi-node fine-tuning, I think we can apply it to the multi-node fine-tuning of Gemma.
Yeah. So gamma, I guess, and even like not only parallelism, but some other parameters also not compatible, right? Or,
Yeah.
or like, can you give us example, like, some of the parameters which are not compatible between the configs between models?
Mm,
uh, Sorry, I just wanted to ask. So I understand the argument that some of the recipes and configs are not compatible, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but
mm,
we will have that compatibility already, information already in that map we create, right? The torch tune plus node plus recipe gives recipe plus config. Sorry, runtime gives recipe plus config. So that map, whatever we create, that will already have the information of what will work and what will not work, right?
Mm-hmm.
So through that, the user can we can throw an error saying that this recipe does not support this specific thing or something.
Yeah, I think we still even with Shao's approach, we still need to have this some sort of validation, right? Like, for example, if user
yeah,
wants to do distributed fine tuning for Gemma, and if Gemma doesn't support it, we just return an error, right?
yeah.
But I think, like, so Salish, like, to your point, like, in terms of I agree that probably putting model under torch-tune config also makes sense from user perspective experience. Like instead of, asking user to understand the runtime reference as, like as the separate property.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I think the question is like, so okay, so let's discuss this two separately. So putting model under torch-tune config, right?
Mm.
Do we see any problems with this? Like, do we see the problems when folks want to leverage this torch-tune config with their custom runtimes? Like, if you create your custom runtime and this runtime has a different name, do you see
Mm.
any problems with this?
No, right? Because see, first of all, this torch
Mm.
student config, there is already a set value, set number of models, right? We
Mhm.
can't within the same torch student config. It's not like we can use some custom model. So
Mhm.
they would have to use the runtime reference as something else, like because inherently TorchTune doesn't support custom models, from what I understand.
Yeah, I think that's right. But what about custom? What about if platform engineers want to override our runtimes, like with the specific like tolerations to the affinity resources? Like,
Uh,
I think they should just follow the conventions, right? Uh,
Right. So
mhm.
this model will be used to decide the recipe, right? So
Yeah,
if someone is overwriting it, they should probably have some way to like manually select the recipe and
yeah,
config.
and maybe they should also have the same name, right? Yeah, so they should probably also have the same name. For example, like if we say like, let me open this again. 1 second.
So if they want to override it, they can just pass the arguments directly, right? They don't need to use this model name like field. They can leave it empty and they can pass their
No,
own.
I think my question is like, imagine like you have a team, right, of platform engineers and data scientists, right?
Hmm.
And those platform engineers, they still want to use Torchtune and like as default, like a same kind of approach that we offer, like we provide as a community, but they want to have some customizations on top of our, runtimes and upstream, right?
Okay.
So should they follow the same convention name to make sure, like data scientists can still leverage this API, um, in that case? That's my sense what I'm talking about. Um,
Mhm.
like because the data scientists has only like they only have this model parameter under torchtune config, right?
Mm.
So how we can map this model to the name of the runtime?
Name of the runtime.
Yeah, name of the runtime you have on the cluster, like cluster training runtime, right?
So name of the runtime is dependent on the TorchTune config itself, right? So what I'm
Mm.
suggesting is that we'll have only one YAML for TorchTune as a whole, and using this model name itself, we will be able to like know what arguments to pass, right? Ultimately, the two main arguments is recipe and config, and I think we should be able to decide that using like the model name alone. Um,
But we need to maintain this list on the client side, right?
Yeah, but we are anyway like gonna store that map on the client side, so I don't think it's a big leap to
But
store it.
we okay, but we will store the map name on the client side only with validations. Like for example, if you can do multi-node for Gemma or for Quen, right? It's not
Mm.
about like we don't need to really store like mapping between model and the runtime name on the client side. It is not necessary, I guess, right? Um,
See, but there's only one runtime, right? Ultimately, you'll have to store the relationship between a config and a recipe. Like that is the only thing that you would need to know, right?
yeah.
If a certain recipe works for a certain config. And since they follow, TouchTune follows a certain standard of how they name their files and all that. I think we should be good enough only with the name of the model. So using the name of the model,
Yeah,
using
yeah,
the
I see. So, okay. Uh, yeah, sure. Like, what do you think? I guess like you propose the same topics, like the same suggestion before to have one runtime for Torch soon. Um, I guess like the problem with this, how we can make sure what models we support as a community, right? Like, do we want to store them on the client side, or it should be config map? Like, I'm wondering like how we want to adopt them, right? Because SDK, the client side stays separate from the control plane, and the control plane is kind of because like the problem would be in the future when we decouple Kubeflow SDK from the control plane, right?
Hmm.
Like since you're storing these models on the client side, we as like the control plane cannot validate what we support, right? This also
Uh,
could be a problem, right?
yeah, yeah.
Like
But will
I
this?
think yeah,
Sorry,
good,
sorry.
good.
Sorry.
My only
So,
point, like maybe the things what we support should be on the service side, on the system side, right?
mm, it
Uh,
makes sense what you're saying. But won't we run into the same problem when we store this map of these
mhm.
three things to two things on the SDK? Wasn't that the idea before this?
Yeah, I think yeah, validation. So I think validation also could be part of the webhook, to be honest. Like
Okay.
we can so so we need to do two things. We need to do validation, we need to do mutation, right?
Mm,
Mutation, we need to make sure like where we select the specific recipe plus the config, right?
mm,
And the validation, we need to make sure that the user can set up the appropriate parameters, right?
mm.
Should we bypass everything to the system side, like to the webhook? Like, Shao,
Uh,
what do you think? Like, yeah, good.
no, no.
Yeah, I think for the config map, we can maintain it in the SDK side, but we can make some validations in the webhook. Yeah.
Hmm. Because like the recipe and the config, they also bypass via container arcs, right? Like this recipe, what is it? Recipe tune run. Yeah, you're passing the number of the name of the recipe, and then you're passing the config, right? Um,
Yeah. And we need also do some validations. For example, if we use single device fine tuning, we need to examine
mhm,
the resource allocation. For example, we can use more than
mhm,
one GPU. This
mhm,
is
mhm.
also need further validation, and I think it's improper to do it in the SDK side.
Yeah, yeah,
We
yeah, yeah,
need we need to
yeah,
do
yeah,
it in the
yeah, yeah.
webhook,
Yeah, that makes sense.
validation webhook.
That makes sense. I think this is possible. Like, Salish, what do you think? Because it should maybe be part of clients eventually.
Yeah, definitely validation should be on the controller side. But
Mm-hmm.
my point I feel still stands, right? Like ultimately validations either way in both cases will be on this the controller side. But on the SDK
Mm-hmm.
side, uh, we can still construct it, and then if some error happens, then
Yeah,
controller itself
yeah,
can tell
yeah.
you that something is wrong.
I even think the construction should be in the webhook, not in the SDK.
Oh, okay.
Because the construction, like imagine, like I agree with you, maybe we should have like some sort of model name environment variable that we should
Mm,
bypass as the container arcs, or maybe we
mm,
can bypass it something else like, and then we checking this value, checking the user wants to use the torch tune config, and then
mm,
we set up in the appropriate, the appropriate relationship, right, to the
mm,
recipe and the recipe and the config on the torch tune side. Uh, I think this still can be done on the mutation side, right? On the webhook side, isn't it?
mm. So the idea of trainer was that you take some arguments, say take some
Hmm.
config in Python, and then you add arguments uh, to the this thing, right? To the CRD
Hmm.
of the training runtime or training job. So
Yeah,
now, how will that work on from Python to how do you transfer those those things directly
yeah,
to the webhook?
yeah. I think that we could talk about, like we can discuss, like whether we need a separate API or we can for now use environment variables, right?
I
Uh,
see.
yeah, maybe we can have another API, but yeah, I don't know if we need to have introduce the torch tune config on the train job side.
Hmm.
Maybe this could be like a future potential of maybe we can do this in the future, right? For now, we can just use the trainer environment variables as the initial approach. Um,
Right.
Yeah, but I still think this could be kind of like I think like why we don't want to introduce this on API on the CRD level because like in a way how those configs constantly changing, right? Like they're adding new parameters, they're removing parameters. Like I think initially we want to avoid constantly CRD updates, right? Because from the Kubernetes standpoint, like it's not, you should avoid like a lot of updates for CRD because you need to bump the version, right? If you introduce any breaking changes, right? Um, yeah, but I think like in the future, once we have the initial implementation, we can think about like whether we should have additional like another CRD on the train job side. Yeah, additional API, sorry, on the train job side, right? Yeah, but I think I agree. Like in terms of the mutation plus validation, I think we didn't put this to the proposal, right, Shao? But I think we should probably have this on the system side, if that makes sense to you as well, Shao.
Yeah.
And to your like original topic in terms of one runtime or multiple runtimes, right? Um, so what are the benefits to have one runtime versus multiple? I guess like having multiple runtimes allows us to first of all allows like users to see like clearly see what we support, right? And also like
Yeah.
allows us to have this unit like E2 test in the future, right? Right. You go ahead.
Yeah. Well, if we use one training runtime for Tor2, we need to specify the recipe and the config, and that is drawback compared to the current approach. Its advantage is that it can native support all of the models and the fine-tuning strategies supported by Tor2, because we just need to specify the recipe and the config, and we don't need to mutate the config.
Yeah, I think like I would say from the user experience perspective, I think it's better to support less but make sure it's reliable rather than say we support everything and user will see errors when they try to use it, right? I think this is what we've done initially with Debunker when we designed a Strand SDK. I think the idea was great, but the problem was because we kind of like it was driven by Hugging Face trainer API. We always face this issue of compatibility because you need to make sure like those libraries are compatible. So it's not kind of like driven by by the config that we kind of give to the user. And we see a lot of problems with CI and CD, right? And make sure like those libraries are compatible. I think like if we say we only support two models, and you always have the results you expect, I think that will be better probably, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that so again I think it's a great discussion. So just two outcomes. Like the first one is putting like model under Torch, I think makes sense. Um, maybe putting model name rather than asking users to put the runtime reference here. Yeah, from the experience perspective.
So in the
Yeah.
the original approach, right? So how will the users know, like if you're a Python developer, what is the way you'll know what models are already there? Like you have to do like get training
Yeah.
and
I
is
think we
that
need to have another API for this, like list Torch to models or something like this, right? Which can list them, the list of models that we support, right?
Mm.
I think we need another API for this. Um, on the model side, by the way, can we use the model config parameter for this? Because in any case, we need to download the model. Or like, Shao, let me ask you one question. So TorchTune, how does it download model? Like, how do we download foundation model on the trainer?
If we use Tor2 to download the model, it will conducted by the GPU node. So we propose to use our model initializer and dataset initializer to download the model and the
Yeah. So,
datasets.
yeah. Is there any specific things on a TorchTune they do when they do model initially, like model downloading from Hugging Face?
It just do the same as our model initializer.
Same, right?
But I think maybe our model initializer also support download from the S3.
Yeah.
It's a feature.
So in that case, should we just use this model config parameter that we already have and say like user can bypass the storage URI to model they want to optimize, and then we validate whether like this model is supported by TorchTune for us, like from the system perspective.
Do you want to, which do you prefer to do it in the SDK side or the system side?
Yeah, so the validation should be on the system side probably, but the setup, like, so we're removing this runtime reference from here, right? So the question that we're talking about, like, should we put the model name under fine-tuning config, or it should be in the model config under train API?
I think we may need to put it in the DRC config API, since we may support other channel and other COI launcher in the future.
And other initializers as well, right? Imagine like maybe you have your own custom storage for, Gemma, right? And maybe you like it's maybe a fully compatible model with Hugging Face, right? And you don't want to use Hugging Face as an initializer. So my proposal is like maybe we should, similar to the dataset as you did here, right? Maybe
Yeah, I agree.
should do the same with the model, right?
Yeah.
And then based on this storage URI, like we just check whether this model is supported by us, right, as a community, by looking, and we can do this in the webhook side, right? Just to validate that the model is equal to the one that we support, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Salish, what do you think? Like, does it make sense to you?
Yes, it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
We will do the model validation in the webhook, and we'll do the config validation in the mutate phase in the Torch plugin. Is it sound good to you?
Yeah, I think yeah. So we don't really support today the mutation as part of our plugins, but I think this is what we should talk with Yuki, because I think this is interesting. Because basically, like our plugins should support not only validation but also mutation, right?
Yeah.
Or yeah. We also had this only building stage, right? Yeah, let's definitely talk about it offline. I think it's an interesting question, like, because today, for now, we can do this in the webhook by itself, right? But then we can maybe put this to the framework, to this pipeline framework directly, right?
Yeah.
All right. And in terms of the experience of model config, it sounds like okay for you, right? To specify the model, like the name of the model you want to optimize, right?
Yeah.
So just to clarify, is this model name going to be used anytime inside TorchTune config, like to create the arguments?
Yeah, so yeah, we need to take this model name and we need to map it to the recipe plus config inside the orchestration, right? So we're taking the model, we're checking this model is valid, right? And then we associate it with appropriate config plus recipe based on the other configurations like number of nodes and maybe like other parameters like resources per node as well, right?
Right. So there should be one validation checking whether TorchTune supports that model, like if it's in.
Yeah, not TorchTune, but actually we support this model, right? So first of all, we need to check like the runtime for the model is deployed. Like imagine like I want to fine tune, Gemma 2. We're checking like the runtime is exist on the control plane. Then like we taking like scaling config plus other properties and make sure those properties are valid as well. So we need to maintain this association between distribute training, like whether these models can support distribute training and other things, right? And then also we taking them, if everything is valid, we're taking the model and associated with the recipe plus with the config plus recipe, right? For the torsion. Yeah. So basically with one of those configs here, one of those recipes, right? I think they have recipe plus config. Yeah. I think they should work definitely. So And we do a lot of on the system side, which means like it's not on the client side.
Right.
Yeah. So Xiao, like, what do you think? Like, I know we have 4 more minutes, like, but like, any like, do you want to update the cap and then we can jump to the implementation, or how do you want to move
Yeah,
forward?
I will update soon. Maybe tomorrow or today.
Okay.
I will do it quickly so that we can merge this PR in this week and start implementation
Yep.
in the next week. I'm not sure if we could catch up with KubeCon in April 1st. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see on the timeline again. I will definitely help you with some implementation. But like even if we support one model, maybe that will be
Yeah.
enough for the release.
Yeah. Sound good to me.
Just maybe like one follow-up question. Like we kind of redesign our train API to this experience. Like any feedback, basically like we want to split this train API between custom trainer and FT config, like fine-tuning config. When in the future we will support more, config not based on TorchTune. Like, we discussed NVIDIA NeMo before, right? Or maybe supporting other configs for fine-tuning. So any feedback, any kind of maybe does it look good in terms of experience? Um,
I think it looks good. This way we can support multiple configs. One thing I was thinking about is if there are common like fields or common
mhm.
things between each config, do we want it to keep it common or do we want to
Yeah,
replicate multiple times?
yeah, I think it's a good question. Yeah, so I think we want to keep them common, but it's challenging given like
Yeah. That's what. We
uh,
need some base class and
yeah,
then we have to like inherit.
yeah. That's why I think I asked about LoRa before, right? Like for Q LoRa and LoRa can be just put it on the LoRa config. Um,
Mm.
I feel like we need to just iterate slowly. I think we need to do some consolidation in the future, right?
Mm.
Because maybe we can, decouple maybe Q LoRa and LoRa to the different configs so we can reuse it for different, frameworks we're using for fine tuning, right? Uh,
Mm.
but maybe this could be done in the future, right?
Mm.
And
I
custom
think,
trainer,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
sorry.
Go ahead.
I that's what I think we might need to be careful because like if you keep changing it, like it will all of these might be breaking changes, right, from
Yeah,
our
yeah,
clients.
yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. Um, yeah, I think again, introducing breaking changes on the client side, I think might be okay initially. I understand like it's probably not preferable for users, but I think at least we need to support two type of frameworks for fine tuning so we can understand like what will be the common
Mm.
configurations, right? Uh,
Yeah,
and
fair.
custom train, they can always use custom trainer, right? Like if they don't want to use those, pre-configured trainers, right, for fine tuning.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think it's a great discussion. So super exciting for this. I think like, what definitely I think can build something really smart and interesting for, users to try out. Especially like since they don't have any other ways to use Torchstone on Kubernetes, like without really understanding Kubernetes. So
Mm.
Yeah.
yeah,
They launched their multi-node chaining with Slurp.
yep,
Yeah, we may become the standard of to run your own Kubernetes.
yep, yeah, I agree. I agree. So two things like let's create this issue for, future optimization of Torchstone to offload this data processing to CPU nodes, right? And let's
Yeah,
update the
this is
cap.
one
Yeah.
point.
Yeah,
And that point is the configure validation and model validation.
makes sense. Yeah, any other questions? Let's discuss this roadmap and other topics maybe next week in 2 weeks. Any other things we can talk about before we close off?
Henry, I had added the issue which I was working on recently about the flagging thing for sort manager.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I had reviewed some discussions of the manifests, which was the issue raised in the manifest repository.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that there are mixed opinions about the sort manager.
Yep. Yeah. I think that makes sense, Garrett. I think like um I still want to understand like whether we want to support Test Manager in the Kubeflow platform. and the MVP of Kubeflow platform. I think it's kind of tied to discussion of Helm charts. So let's follow up on this once we discuss. So you know this they started this proposal for Helm charts for Kubeflow. I don't know if you take a look, but I can drop the cap here if you're interesting. But like I want to see how we can simplify the Kubeflow platform by itself, like MVP of Kubeflow platform, which means like we want to, remove number of dependencies it has. Which means like Search Manager is one of the optional dependency which doesn't require for MVP. And I understand for production, like 90% you will use Search Manager, right? But it is not for MVP to try out, right? That is why, like, I would like to understand, like, I would like to find consensus, um, like what we could do. But let me again raise this topic once we review this cap to adding the help charts for Kubeflow platform. Does make sense?
Yeah, that works well.
All right. Any other questions?
I want to make sure. I want to confirm one thing. You mean create a torch tune issue to offload IO tasks to CPU tasks? If I understand correctly, do we want they implement a new interface for us, like tune preprocess and preprocess data sets separately in another container?
Yeah. Let me maybe
Yeah.
rephrase it. So let's ask about best practices to preprocess data set. So yeah, I think we in general should create an issue to discuss this. Yeah, let me see. So best practice to preprocess the set before fine tuning. Reduce.
Yes, that sounds good to me. Reduce GPU
Yeah,
using use time.
upload GPUs from data processing tasks. Yeah, so I think the goal is to gather their feedback, like why they want to couple those two things, right? And is there any opportunities for us to decouple so we can reduce number of, like we can basically use CPUs for tokenization, right? Plus data set initialization. Yeah, so we should use CPU. Probably I'm wrong. Like I think for tokenization, I think it depends on data set. And if data set is kind of non-tabular data set, like images, sometimes people still use GPUs. But if it is tabular data, yeah.
I guess they may pre-process the data with the CPU, but in our container, we'll first do pre-process and then fine tuning in a same container allocated with some CPUs and some GPUs. But in their scenarios, torch tune just run on a metal machine, and it's not erupted by the container. That's the question.
Yeah, and for like when they do this with Slurm, I guess like Slurm just schedule those tasks, right? It doesn't do anything with container orchestration, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm not super familiar with Slurm like command, but in Slurm, can you specify resources you want to use to execute this task? Or you can do like as batch?
I think they can specify something like num-proc and num-node like PyTorch, but they will use but they if I recall correctly, they can specify the resource usage, but they just schedule these tasks to the metal machine, to the bare metal machine, and we'll use the resource on that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Yeah, so basically in Slurm, like in sbatch, right? I think they called it sbatch command. Like it doesn't allow us to. So like we need to make sure those bare metal machines like they kind of CPU based, right? Not GPU based. It's up to the to cluster like to cluster admins to configure it, right? Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that there are a lot of
investigate.
Yeah.
I go.
Yeah. Good.
I'll investigate to include to see whether they use CPU for the table data.
Absolutely. Like I think like there are a lot of things or like opportunities for optimization, especially like this is like where Kubernetes like play a huge role for container orchestration, right? Because like Slurm or API, yeah, they works great on HPC clusters, but usually like they're not really think about for container orchestration, right? On those HPC clusters, because you still need to build some scheduling capabilities on top, I guess, right?
Yeah.
The other part, which is including Kubernetes control plane. Yeah, so I think it's great. Let's. I will help you with discussion. Let's just create, maybe just start this discussion with them, and we can definitely follow up with some ideas.
Yeah.
All right. Any other last questions, comments?
No other comments.
Sounds great. Thank you for this great discussion. So looking forward for the implementation, and let me know like offline if you need any help or we need to follow up with this. Thanks everyone. So see you in 2 weeks.
See you.
Thank you.